Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel, so if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land with ILTV, have no worries. It's time for our new show this week in Israel, where we'll give you the scoop on everything you need to know about the last 7 days right from Tel Aviv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, here to keep you informed.
This morning across the country, sirens blared at 10 a.m., beginning a day of reflection as Israel commemorates Holocaust Remembrance Day. This is a solemn day when Jews all over the world look directly into the past to face the horrors of Hitler's, quote, final solution, as well as to the future to ensure that such an atrocity never happens again. Ceremonies officially began last night at sundown. For Prime Minister Netanyahu, who spoke at an event in Jerusalem, the grim demise of 6 million Jews at the hands of the Nazis in World War II has more relevance today than ever before, given the threat of both Iran and Syria on Israel's doorstep.
אירועי הימים האחרונים מלמדים שהעמידה מול הרשע והתוקפנות היא שליחות שמוטלת על כל דור. אין דור שפטור במשימה זו, ואבוי לדור שמתחמק ממנה. ראינו את צלב הקרס שהניפו הפורעים ליד גדרות עזה. ראינו את הילדים הסורים שנטבחו בנשק קימי. ליבנו נקרע ממראות הזוועה.
Today's 10 a.m. sirens are a customary tradition for this day of remembrance. For 2 minutes, Israelis all over the country stopped walking, stopped their cars, and bowed their heads in reverence. The Israeli Knesset is also conducting its yearly Unto Every Person There Is a Name ceremony, a ritual which recites the names of those Jews lost in the Holocaust for nearly 2 hours. This will all coincide with the March of the Living in Poland later this afternoon, where Israeli President Reuven Rivlin and top security brass will march 3 kilometers from Auschwitz to Birkenau extermination camps. Meanwhile, Israelis continue to carry the motto, Never Again, to say that such horrors will never again befall the Jewish people. Now, moving on, Israel's Yad Vashem is a museum committed to preserving every last piece of evidence of the Holocaust. That includes testimonials from survivors, documents from the Nazi regime, and obviously hundreds of thousands of artifacts from the more than 6 million victims of the final solution. Today, there are only about 80,000 Holocaust survivors still alive in Israel, which is why preserving their artifacts is more important now than ever. Yad Vashem's ongoing Gathering the Fragments drive asks people to gather any Holocaust-era items they may have and donate them to the museum to educate future generations. Obviously, this is a very personal request for many, but one that thousands of survivors and their families fully understand. One woman recently donated her doll that she kept during the time of the Nazi regime, on the condition that she can come to the museum a few times a year to see her beloved keepsake. The drive has collected nearly 124,000 treasured artifacts since it opened in 2011. This includes personal documents, uniforms worn in the Nazi death camps, pictures, pocket watches, and so much more. In some cases, the collecting of all these artifacts has even opened long-forgotten doors to the past. An Israeli woman was just able to read a letter her mother wrote to her back in 1943 before being sent to her death at the Sobibor concentration camp mere days later.
She always wrote with a lot of hope, never depressive, never it goes wrong. She had a wonderful way of writing, and especially she writes, dear child, 1,000 kisses for you, and then mommy. You know, mommy is a very special word. It's difficult to say mother or mother, and here she writes mommy. It is her, and then I feel very close with her.
Violent demonstrations along the Gaza border are continuing, and now a video appearing to show IDF soldiers cheering for the sniper killing of a Palestinian protester has just surfaced. The short film has sparked massive controversy across political lines, and an investigation is now set to take place. Here with more on this story is ILTV's Aaron Porras, but first, let's take a look at the video.
איך הוא מתכופף תמיד בדיוק כשנוקר? לא ורוד, אני על הכחול אני.
וואי, זה סרטון! יש! בן של
איזה סרטון, הנה, תרוצו לפנות אותו. בטח שצילמתי את זה.
All right. You know, how are people reacting to this video? Because it's pretty hard to watch.
Yeah.
We just saw it ourselves here. And as you said, this has divided the government, clearly.
Yeah, and sparked an investigation. And, you know, early reports from the early conclusions from the investigation are basically saying a few things. Number one, that they believe this video is circulating now, but it was filmed in December during clashes unrelated to those that we're seeing on the border now. Further, they're saying that, you know, the IDF has concluded that the sniper was in line with military values and is not going to be brought up on any charges or anything like that, but that the other soldiers commenting in the films were acting in ways, quote, not befitting of the values and the morals of the IDF. The cameraman who was shooting the film will be brought up for a disciplinary hearing, and he may face criminal charges, but none have been filed at this time. As for the victim in the video, that's kind of the more interesting part. According to the IDF, the victim was not only a key instigator in the clashes at the time, who had repeatedly refused orders to turn around, but he apparently is not even dead, according to the IDF. The IDF claims that he was shot in the leg and not in the head. Now, as far as people are responding to this, you know, dividing the country, yeah, I mean, we're getting left-wing and pro-Palestinian groups who are calling out for the sniper to be, you know, to brought up on criminal charges, and you know, like Ayman Odeh, who heads up the Joint Arab List in the Knesset. And then you have people, NGOs, who are saying, you know, this is any investigation is too little, too late anyway, because this happens all the time. But then you have people, you know, on the other side of the of this argument, like Minister Bennett, Erdan, and Lieberman, who are defending the actions here. Yeah.
It's just interesting to me, on what grounds are they being supportive of celebrating, you know, this type of action? So
it's not so much that they're supporting the celebration, and in fact, all of the people I just mentioned, Bennett, Erdan, etc., have said that what you hear in this video, the narration, is not professional and shouldn't have been said, and is certainly, you know, not okay. But at the same time, to look at the actions of the field, and they're saying, you know, hey, they're protecting the border. I think Science Minister Ophir Akunis said it possibly best, that, you know, it's not like this guy was coming up to approaching the border to make peace. So it's, I mean, it's a very difficult situation, but the investigation is ongoing.
Well, I mean, I think it's fair to say that, you know, this video certainly does not make the Israeli military look good. So there is something to be said about the things that are said in moments like this, whether or not they are morally viable.
Exactly.
All right, let's go to our next story. A bomb targeting Israeli construction vehicles has just detonated along the Gaza border. At this time, no Israeli casualties or injuries have been reported. No terror group has claimed responsibility for the attack yet, but as always, the army is holding Hamas responsible for the terror in the Strip. Israeli forces have just targeted a number of Hamas military targets within Gaza. The explosive device appears to have been planted sometime during the ongoing March of Return demonstrations. Hamas maintains that this is merely a peaceful sit-in. However, Israel has roundly concluded that the protests are merely a smokescreen for further violence against the Jewish state. The army has faced controversy for its use of force, at times lethal force, in keeping tens of thousands of Palestinians from breaching the border fence. This morning's bombing is in line with the Israeli claim, however, that the protests are merely a publicity stunt to facilitate terror. This explosion took place in the buffer zone that separates Gaza and Israeli territory, but in a region that Israel considers its own. Israeli bulldozers are routinely in this area to maintain the security barrier.
Explosive developments are coming from Syria right now. An Iranian base in Syria known as the T4 has just been hit with deadly airstrikes, killing 14 people. Iranian nationals have been confirmed among the dead. American forces were initially blamed for the attack, but in a shocking twist, Russian military now says Israeli jets conducted the airstrikes. Russia's defense ministry says that the two F-15 jets belonging to Israel's Air Force conducted the attack from Lebanese airspace, believed to be a common Israeli tactic. At this time, it's believed that Syrian air defenses shot down 5 of the 8 missiles fired at the base, and that the 3 remaining missiles successfully made impact along the western part of the base. This T4 base is the same one Israel is believed to have attacked in the past, most recently this past February, in response to an Iranian drone that breached Israeli airspace. Sources initially pinned the attack on American forces, most likely because President Trump just yesterday threatened a big price to pay for Syria's deadly use of chemical weapons against its own civilians. Despite this threat, however, the Pentagon immediately refuted claims that U.S. troops were behind the airstrike. Syria's regime has since backed Russia's claim that Israel is indeed responsible, and the Israeli army as policy does not comment on any alleged military matters such as these.
Less than a week after accusations broke of yet another Syrian chemical weapons attack, Syria has just been confirmed as the upcoming chair at the UN Conference on Disarmament in Geneva. In the past, the forum has negotiated treaties on the non-proliferation of both chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons. But with a country such as Syria now preparing to take the helm, many are again questioning the efficacy of such hypocrisy. ILTV's Aaron Porras has more on the report. So, Aaron, let's start with the accusations of hypocrisy. And Syria and Russia have denied these accusations.
And vehemently so, but there have been multiple investigations dating all the way back to 2013 that have confirmed Syria as effectively trying to maximize civilian body count and attacking multiple times using chemical weapons.
How many times are we talking here?
By most counts, and we're talking at least 7. I mean, we're talking 26 killed with sarin gas in March 2013. Another several hundred in Damascus while they were sleeping with sarin gas in August 2013. Then between 2014 and 15, 3 attacks with chlorine gas. Then 90 more killed with sarin gas in Idlib province last year in April. And again, just the 40 or earlier this weekend in Duma.
So what has the international community done about this so far?
As much as they could, but a lot of people's hands are tied, and that has to do with powerful friends on behalf of Syria. I mean, we're talking about in 2013, the UN Security Council ordered Syria to count and destroy all of their chemical weapons. A few years later, the a joint panel concluded that they had gotten rid of it, but opponents to the Assad regime concluded definitively, they said they're lying, they still have them. And then, as we know, several more attacks were committed since then. So
now they're going to head a forum against chemical weapons.
And now they're supposed to head a forum on chemical weapons, right? So I think the real reaction at this point is to see what will happen with Trump, threatening to fire against him and things like that. But the reactions haven't been strong enough yet.
All right, thanks for joining us, Aaron.
Thank you.
All right, well, it's official. Guatemala is officially set to become the second country to move its embassy to Jerusalem, effectively recognizing the city as the capital of Israel. Apparently, we won't have to wait too soon for this either, as Guatemala's new embassy is set to open its door on May 16th, just 2 days after Netanyahu cuts the red tape at the new Jerusalem-based American embassy. Guatemala's ambassador is currently in Jerusalem as we speak, going over the fine print. President Jimmy Morales announced just last month that Guatemala would be next to move its embassy, but now that it's a done deal, many Israelis are obviously doing backflips. While Netanyahu has often boasted that other countries would quickly follow America's example, much of the world has been hesitant to say the least. International outrage to Trump's controversial Jerusalem decision late last year continues to rage on. The speech effectively severed the Palestinians' ties with the United States because they no longer see America as an impartial negotiator to Middle East peace. This is a position held by much of the world now as well, who say that the issue of Jerusalem should only be decided by Israel and the Palestinians and not an external country. Still, many Israeli politicians say it's finally time for the world to just admit the obvious and recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, something Israel as a nation has the right to decide.
For many, Israel symbolizes the dream of Jewish refugees who fled persecution and survived the Holocaust, seeking a safe place in the world to live in peace. This dream is at the heart of a fierce moral and political debate concerning Israel's African asylum seeker community. The state has branded them as legal infiltrators and has mobilized to deport them to an unnamed country in Africa against their will if necessary. But the majority, mostly Christians from Eritrea and Sudan, say they too fled persecution and genocide, seeking a better life in Israel. ILTV's Brett Allen Smith is here with us. And Brett, I understand that there's a new court ruling on this now.
Correct. So as of now, there are over 200 asylum seekers currently being held in prison, and the state detained them for refusing to be deported to a third unnamed country in Africa, which is now widely believed to be Uganda. Now, a similar deal with Rwanda fell apart very publicly last week because the Israeli courts required Rwanda to assure the safety of deported migrants. And the High Court now has just given the government 5 days to either greenlight these deportations of these men in jail, maybe going to Uganda, or else let them go because time's up.
Right, and this entire deportation plan is obviously highly controversial. Legally, the state has hit roadblocks to start these mass deportations because the High Court has repeatedly declared them unconstitutional. And that hit a breaking point last week when Netanyahu announced that the UN would safely resettle one migrant in a Western country for every other migrant Israel provided asylum to.
Right.
But after backlash from his own coalition, his coalition partners, Netanyahu very publicly canceled the deal in less than 24 hours.
Right, and that brings me to the next big update here, which is that both Naftali Bennett's party and Netanyahu's party are both preparing to separate bills to basically circumvent the court's power to stop those deportations, to stop any decisions at all in the matter. In fact, it's called a circumvention clause. Now, some people, like Naftali Bennett, for example, will say that this does not circumvent anything. It's merely giving power back to the people, he says. But on the other end of the spectrum, even Israelis who are for these deportations say that this move could forever destroy Israel's diplomatic process and maybe put the country down a very dark road, because without courts, you know, what's the balance? What is due process anymore?
Yeah, I will say that nearly 2/3 of Israelis are for the deportations at this time, sometimes even if it involves forcibly removing families. That's what polls say, and this includes women and small children against their will. But at the same time, the backlash to the plan has been significant and global. Just recently, the world's top 60 experts in refugee law begged Israel to halt the deportations.
Right,
And also,
well, I mean, speaking of Holocaust Memorial Day, it's painfully and bitterly ironic to some that Holocaust survivors themselves are the biggest ones speaking out against this idea. There's even a movement of Holocaust survivors who say that they'll hide asylum seekers in their homes, like would save them in Germany or Europe, rather than send them to danger or maybe even death in an unspecified African country, which is generally what most experts agree would be the case here.
Now, the state now has 5 days to close a deal that Uganda publicly says doesn't exist, and then either justify it to the courts or block the courts altogether. And we will certainly be following this closely. Thanks for joining. All right, today is Orthodox Easter, one of the holiest days of the year for Orthodox Christians all over the world. Tens of thousands of pilgrims have just gathered in Jerusalem's Church of the Holy Sepulchre to fulfill a sacred ritual that's over 1,000 years old. Orthodox Christians base their Easter holiday on the Julian calendar, different from the Gregorian calendar used by most countries in the West. But make no mistake, Orthodox Easter is just as holy to the millions of Orthodox Christians worldwide who celebrate the holiday every year. This year's pilgrimage to Jerusalem's Church of the Holy Sepulchre, built upon the site where Christians believe Jesus was crucified, buried, and resurrected, is a tradition 1,200 years in the making. Either crammed inside the church or waiting outside in the streets, thousands of Christians pass the holy fire from candle to candle, representing the resurrection of their Lord and Savior. These candles will be taken back to their respective churches all over the world. The holy flame itself is believed to originate from somewhere in the edicule, the small chamber where Jesus' tomb is believed to be. Top clerics from the Eastern Orthodox Church enter the edicule and emerge with the flame. Its symbolism made all the more incredible by its mysterious origin.
Now, the Israeli hit series Fauda has managed to capture the hearts and minds of viewers across the planet with its nuanced portrayal of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But now the Netflix show is making headlines for a different reason. The boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel is threatening Netflix with a lawsuit for distributing the drama. The Israeli show focuses on an elite commando unit of the Israeli Defense Forces whose members embed themselves in the Palestinian community to gather intelligence and prevent terror attacks. But the Hebrew and Arabic language show takes a deeper look into the struggles of the Palestinian community as well, often making it hard for viewers to distinguish who they truly support. Well, the BDS movement doesn't seem to think that Fauda is doing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict justice and is calling on Israel to nix the series, which they claim is a, quote, anti-Arab, racist Israeli propaganda tool that legitimizes violent acts committed against the Palestinians, end quote. Hollywood is having none of it, though, and more than 50 entertainment industry executives have signed a letter in support of Netflix praising Fauda for showing the power of art, by bringing up difficult but important conversations and, quote, expanding our horizons and allowing us to experience different points of view, end quote. Some of the powerful executives who have signed the letter include Rick Rosen, the head of TV at WME, and Jody Gerson, the chairman and CEO of the Universal Music Publishing Group. Fauda was created by journalist Avi Zakharov and starring actor Lior Raz, both of which served in the IDF unit depicted in the series. And now, with Holocaust Memorial Day coming to a close and Yom HaZikaron, or Memorial Day, less than a week away, Here are the top 5 ways that Israelis commemorate their lost loved ones.
Holocaust Remembrance Day is today, and here in the Holy Land, we never forget. While it's important to have a day to remember those who lost their lives in the horrific events of the Holocaust, I'm here to give you guys 5 ways people here in Israel remember in order to get more educated and teach future generations. Number 1 is the March of the Living. This educational program brings people from all over the world, including Israeli high school students, to Poland for a 3-kilometer walk around the old concentration camps. This march allows people to get more educated about the Holocaust as well as pay tribute to all the victims and lives lost. Check out the March of the Living organization page to learn more. Second on our list is called Zikaron B'Salon, which means memories in the living room. These events allow people to host Holocaust survivors in their living rooms, gather people in their homes, and hear their survivors' stories. This is a unique way to commemorate this day and allow people to connect with survivors in a more meaningful and intimate way. Make sure to check out the Zikaron B'Salon website to see how you can get involved. Third on our list is an absolutely breathtaking moment. Israel commemorates the 6 million Jews who were murdered by sounding off a 2-minute siren that brings the entire country to a halt. It's most likely that you won't find a single person not standing, paying their respects to those lives lost, and I mean everyone. Even the highway comes to a complete halt. It's a very emotional moment. Fourth up is the Holocaust Remembrance Day ceremony. During the ceremony, Holocaust survivors light 6 torches, which are meant to symbolize the approximate 6 million Jews who perished in the Holocaust. The president and prime minister both deliver speeches, and chief rabbis recite prayers. Each year, there are fewer survivors that hold stories and personal experiences from that time period. It's important to listen, learn, and never forget. Last up is a great way to get our younger generation more educated about the history of the Holocaust. A Democratic Congresswoman has just introduced a bill to boost Holocaust education throughout the United States. People always say history repeats itself, but the more we learn, the more we can make sure the Holocaust or anything like it will never be repeated or forgotten. That's all for today's Top 5. Back to you.
That's it for this week's Roundup. Tune in next Friday for our next episode of This Week in Israel. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from Tel Aviv.